What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Teofimo Lopez, 17 wins and 1 loss, taking on Sandor Martin, 40 wins and 2 losses. This fight was initially supposed to be Teofimo Lopez versus Jose Pedraza, but Jose Pedraza had to pull out due to a non-COVID illness. Enter Sandor Martin. And it's kind of interesting because this is in the 140-pound division, which has recently kind of become one of the more exciting and interesting divisions in boxing. And the WBC title was just up for grabs between Regis Prograis and Jose Zepeda. Prograis stopped Zepeda in the 11th round. And that WBC belt was one of 3 belts that the once undisputed champion in the division, Josh Taylor, relinquished in pursuit of his rematch with Jack Catterall. So Josh Taylor had 4 belts, now has only 1 belt without even losing an actual fight. So you also have Ryan Garcia, who looks like he's kind of making his way up to 140. We'll see if him versus Gervonta Davis indeed gets made at that 136-pound catchweight. But another thing that has made the 140-pound division super interesting is that Teofimo Lopez, the former arguably 4 belt, but 3.5 belt, we'll call it, champion at 135, Teofimo Lopez has now moved up to 140 and has 1 fight, only 1 fight in that division, and it was against Pedro Campa earlier this year. So the idea of Teofimo Lopez, one of the most sensational and exciting young fighters in the sport in any division, going to 140 and kind of having a step-up fight against Jose Pedraza, who's still a very good fighter, but in my view has been increasingly beatable in recent years. We just saw him lose the decision to Jose Ramirez, who, let's not scoff at Jose Ramirez. He was just fighting in that battle for undisputed against Josh Taylor last year. But even more recently than that, Jose Pedraza fought to a draw with former 135-pound belt holder Richard Comey, who Teofimo Lopez knocked out to claim his first share of the 135-pound title, and that fight was back in December of 2019. So Pedraza, still very good, but is looking just more and more, I don't want to say average, but I'll say maybe just a step behind elite in recent fights. And Pedraza also lost in recent years against Jose Zepeda, who again just got stopped by Regis Prograis. So it was looking like an interesting fight shaping up between Teofimo Lopez versus Jose Pedraza. But then when you exit Pedraza, enter Sandor Martin, then that fight goes from a okay type of a step-up fight to a okay type of a step-up fight because of what we just saw Sandor Martin do to Mikey Garcia towards the end of 2021. One of the biggest upsets of the year because you were dealing with a former top 10-ish pound for pound Mikey Garcia, who was a champion at 126, 130, very good at 135, and then even held a belt at 140 when he beat Sergey Lipinets. Although I thought that 140 was maybe the bridge too far for Mikey Garcia. I thought 147 was definitely a bridge too far for Mikey Garcia. Now, Mikey Garcia, his career is another conversation unto itself. I feel like there were so many, missed opportunities in terms of who you could have been fighting, but didn't fight. Like, I thought that him versus Vasily Lomachenko would have kind of been an era-defining fight, but that fight never happened. And then when you started getting the emergence of all these other great 140-pounders from Josh Taylor to Regis Prograis, then Teofimo Lopez, wouldn't you have loved to have seen a prime Mikey Garcia fight any one of those guys I just mentioned, or one of those 135-pound guys if you include Gervonta Davis, maybe Devin Haney? It's just, I just had so much respect and admiration for Mikey Garcia's skill set that I would have loved to have seen him fight any one of those guys. Well, it turned out he started chasing a Manny Pacquiao fight, and by the way, there was the idea of Prograis versus Garcia before Garcia then tried to make the fight with Manny Pacquiao, and then Manny Pacquiao instead tried to fight Errol Spence. Errol Spence pulled out and Pacquiao ended up running into Yordenis Ugas instead. It didn't end up working out for Manny Pacquiao, didn't end up working out for Mikey Garcia because he then ended up fighting Sandor Martin, who was a massive massive underdog. And again, Sandor Martin ended up beating Mikey Garcia in Fresno, California. And it was on paper maybe the biggest upset of the year. But when you consider like George Kambosos' unexpected victory over Teofimo Lopez, I feel like Kambosos versus Lopez was considered a bigger upset, more so because of the stakes. But if you're looking at the actual betting lines, and just the fact that nobody even thought that this was a consequential fight for Mikey Garcia, like nobody was even looking at the fight that deeply to analyze Sandor Martin's skill set heading into that fight with Garcia. And then Sandor Martin ends up winning the fight pretty demonstratively, like at least by a couple of rounds. So Sandor Martin is now kind of being reevaluated like, how good is this guy? Well, we think we know how good Teofimo Lopez is, but I'm going to ask you guys, like, how convinced are you that Teofimo Lopez is truly an A or A+ level fighter? Like, he still has a very young career. He's only 17-1. He turned pro in 2016. So yes, we did get the knockout over Richard Comey. Yes, we got those early knockouts over Diego Magdaleno, Mason Menard, where he started hitting Heisman poses and doing the backflips after the knockouts. Like Teofimo Lopez, it seemed like just yesterday was a rising, exciting prospect who was electrifying the crowds, taking people's heads off, but he was fighting less competition. And then he ran into some trouble against Nakatani, but ended up winning a unanimous decision against Masayoshi Nakatani. And then he had the title fight against Richard Comey, and that one pretty much validated people's opinions on Teofimo Lopez. Like, okay, yeah, this guy's legit. If you're knocking out Richard Comey, who had just stopped Ray Beltran prior to that, it's like, yeah, you knock out Richard Comey in the second round, okay, you've got that stamp of approval. So then in the COVID era, or we'll say that COVID summer, that COVID year of 2020, they surprisingly made Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez. And a lot of people, including myself, thought that this was too much too soon for the young, at that time, like 23-year-old Teofimo Lopez. And it was one of those, man, if he ends up getting like taken to school and then just beaten up and outclassed, embarrassingly perhaps, by Lomachenko, this could kind of be like a career killer. Not that Teofimo Lopez would then be a shot fighter, but like confidence-wise, this could have ended up resulting in a type of loss that just sets your career way back to where you never recapture the glow that you had before the loss. But no, Teofimo Lopez gambled, bet on himself, took a little bit less money, and ended up shocking the boxing world with that unanimous decision win over Lomachenko. And those who thought that maybe Teofimo Lopez could win, thought that he could do it maybe by a surprising knockout, but not by beating him round over round and winning a decision against the Matrix, Lomachenko. So this did shake up the boxing world. And granted, since then, you've come to learn Lomachenko had been battling that dogged, shoulder issue that he had a couple fights prior as well. So maybe there was something to it, but I don't want to take credit away from the performance that Teofimo Lopez had and the composure that he had against Vasily Lomachenko. Well, after that, takeover, if you will, they were trying to make the George Kambosos challenge to Teofimo Lopez fight. And first, it was supposed to be, Top Rank who had it. But Bob Arum didn't want to pay them as much as, Teofimo Lopez wanted to get paid. So then they couldn't come to an agreement. It ended up going to a purse bid, which Triller won. And Triller ended up, offering like a bunch of money to both fighters. And then due to COVID, multiple times, they had to reschedule the fight between Lopez and Kambosos. It ended up being rescheduled like 4 or 5 times, if not more. It was pretty crazy, to where Triller ended up losing the fight because they couldn't come with the money and secure the location and fight date, like the 5th or 6th time around. So then DAZN jumped in and ended up seizing the fight. And so they rescheduled it for November of 2021. So this ended up being like more than a year after Teofimo Lopez's win over Lomachenko. And then George Kambosos surprisingly kind of shook up the boxing world with one of the upsets of the year, if not the upset of the year, against Teofimo Lopez, where Lopez, it turned out he was like super sick, battling this, really rare, like an intestinal issue that could have been life-threatening. And it begs the question, how did he even end up being allowed to fight in this case? But Teofimo Lopez had one of the worst strategies and game plans imaginable. Like, he just seemed like he was hell-bent on taking Kambosos' head off, like in the first couple of rounds. Well, Kambosos had other plans, ended up kind of fighting the fight of his life, dropped Teofimo Lopez like towards the end of the first round, and ended up winning a split decision win where George Kambosos had to, come up off the canvas in towards the later rounds as well. So this was a huge setback for Teofimo Lopez to where, he returned to the ring in August of 2022, ended up going up to 140 to fight Pedro Campa. And yes, he did end up knocking Campa out in the 7th round, started beating him up in the later rounds. The first couple of rounds were kind of interesting, but Teofimo Lopez looked pretty sharp in that fight. So now he's about to fight Sandor Martin. And you look at the betting odds, and it's almost like we are ending up where we started off, kind of, in terms of these guys' reputation, where Teofimo Lopez is a huge favorite. I'm talking like 6-1, 7-1, sometimes in some books, 8-1 favorite. And then you've got Sandor Martin, who's like a 5-1 underdog, 6-1 underdog. Like, the reputations have almost reset here. Well, like, let's take a close look at Lopez versus Sandor Martin. Sandor Martin has had a fight since that upset over Mikey Garcia, where he beat the very hard-hitting Jose Felix Jr. via unanimous decision. And, even before the fight against Mikey Garcia, Sandor Martin had beaten K. Prosper via pretty wide decision. In fact, Sandor Martin hasn't lost a fight since back in 2017 against Anthony Yiggett, and that fight was a bit of a firefight. So those who saw Sandor Martin beat Mikey Garcia automatically thought, oh, this must be like a back foot, kind of sweet science, let's get out of the way, and let's move, stick and move type of fighter. But the secret to this one is Sandor Martin has won fights going forward and going backwards. Not to mention he's a southpaw. Not that Teofimo Lopez hasn't beaten good southpaws before. Again, he beat Vasily Lomachenko. But Sandor Martin, I feel, is a little bit more of a puzzle than we are giving him credit for. He's not just a back foot style fighter. No, when he fought K. Prosper, when he fought Anthony Yiggett, he was kind of going hunting. Even when he fought Jose Felix Jr., a very hard hitter at 140. Like, out of Jose Felix Jr.'s wins, like 30-something wins, almost all of them, like it was something like 32 out of 37 victories coming by way of knockout. So if you watch how Sandor Martin fights, when he's coming forward, he's got an excellent distance management ability to where he knows how to, his feet, not only his head movement, but his feet know how to hop out of the way and then hop back in. And granted, I don't know what to make so much of Mikey Garcia's performance against Sandor Martin. Like, you look at Mikey Garcia's lack of head movement, you look at his kind of predictable hunting style after the first, couple of rounds. He started to become predictable in his, okay, I'm going to methodically try to hunt you down, walk you down, and Sandor Martin was back foot-ish against Mikey Garcia. But Mikey Garcia started just trying to look for the 1-2 or 1-2-3, where Sandor Martin more or less had it timed and started throwing some tricky counters and even right-hand lead counter hooks, checking Mikey Garcia as Garcia comes in, and then would roll out of the way and bring the fight back to the middle of the ring, where in Mikey Garcia's prime, he was tremendous in the middle of the ring. Like, Mikey Garcia was such a good all-around fighter with heavy punching power, but great sweet science skills as well. He didn't look like that against Sandor Martin. He looked like his legs and feet weren't as bouncy or quick as Sandor Martin's, nor was his head movement as good as Sandor Martin's. So Teofimo Lopez against George Kambosos, he looked like he lacked head movement in that fight. And there were even a lot of movements against Pedro Campa in his last fight that Teofimo Lopez kind of looked like he might lack a little bit of head movement. Now, his punches were sharp and accurate, and he was a lot more measured in setting up the big shots against Campa than he was against George Kambosos. And he showed those same patient skills, let's set up the big shots, against Richard Comey. But against Nakatani, he hit a lot of moments where he looked like he lacked a bit of head movement. So, look, I think that it's possible that Teofimo Lopez is what a lot of people think he is. But we can't really be certain because it's still a relatively small sample size that we're dealing with. So now at this new 140-pound weight class, how heavy a hitter is Teofimo Lopez? Is he as dangerous at 140 as he was at 135? Just punch for punch. Can he still close the show with one punch at 140? If he can't, and Sandor Martin also appears to be able to take a good punch. Like, he got hit a few times against Mikey Garcia, who is a very heavy-handed hitter. Like, are you convinced that Teofimo Lopez is a harder puncher than Mikey Garcia? Well, Sandor Martin rolls with punches well. He moves his head to get out of the way well. And again, his feet, his ability to just very subtly, very sophisticatedly, and quickly hop out of harm's way, just hop just out of range to where when the guy makes a move, it's almost like you already had a time and boom, boom. You just took that quick step back and then were able to re-enter and throw a long left hand. How well can Teofimo Lopez avoid those shots? It's tough to really tell who's going to be the hunter and who's going to be the hunted here. Like, I've seen enough instances of Sandor Martin both being a back foot fighter and being a patient hunter where you're kind of coming forward, but not in a head over skis way. You're coming forward patiently, like, using the jab and kind of baiting the other guy to throw a punch so then you could counter it. Or if the guy doesn't throw a punch, using, enough feints to be able to confidently throw a left hand without a simultaneous counter, like left hook or something coming back at the same time. Because what you don't want to do is get caught coming forward by a Teofimo Lopez right hand. And how do they say you exploit a southpaw? Well, with the straight right? So, look, it's very possible that Teofimo Lopez might just splash on Sandor Martin with a clean right hand and wobble, rock, or even drop Sandor Martin. But it's also possible that Teofimo Lopez takes a while to figure Sandor Martin out. And there's also this demeanor that Sandor Martin has in the ring where he almost seems like unfazed by like what's going on outside of the immediate action right here. Like, Teofimo Lopez seems more the type to, like, when he gets hit, to kind of like smile or gesture to the crowd like you didn't hurt him. Almost like he's worried about what people think almost as much as what's actually taking place in the ring. Like, you have tons of instances of this against George Kambosos. So if Sandor Martin starts to outbox Teofimo Lopez a bit in the early rounds, who's going to have more composure? Who's going to have the cooler head? Who's going to be able to stay focused to execute their game plan? I don't want to say that Teofimo Lopez is the guy with the puncher's chance here, because that almost dismisses his boxing ability. Like, we saw him box very well against Vasily Lomachenko. I just don't think that this is as lopsided a fight as the betting odds would indicate. I think that it's very possible that Sandor Martin comfortably, calmly outbox and in some cases outfights and outthinks Teofimo Lopez here. That's not out of the question. But I am actually going to go with the A-side fighter with the reputation in this case. I am going to go with Teofimo Lopez. I'm not exactly sure how. I do think that he catches and hurts Sandor Martin at a point here. And I do think that he sets up power punches better than Mikey Garcia did on that night, where he's a little bit less predictable than Mikey was. I think that his jab to the body is going to come into play. I do think that Teofimo is going to get tagged by that left hand a bit, and I think he's going to get tagged by that lead right hand hook. But I think that he's going to stay composed. I think he's going to jab to the body, start setting up big punches. You don't have a lot of Sandor Martin fighting 12-rounders. He fought 12 rounds in that loss to Anthony Yiggett in 2017. He's been scheduled for 12 a couple of times against Andrea Scarpa, where he finished Scarpa in the 9th round, and then back in 2015 against Georgi Mizel, and that was like he stopped Mizel in like the 4th round of a 12-round fight. And then most recently against Kay Prosper in April of 2021, he won a 12-round unanimous decision. I just think that Teofimo Lopez has more late round, elite level experience, and I think that he's going to be able to kind of set up big punches and simply win more rounds than Mikey Garcia was able to. I think that he can drop Sandor Martin. I would be a little bit surprised if he finishes Sandor Martin. Again, I'm not as convinced in his punching power at 140 just yet. I do think that he's a bit of a super athlete. I think that Teofimo Lopez is. But I think that Sandor Martin's athleticism is also slept on. I'm going to go with Teofimo Lopez here via very competitive and somewhat close decision win. Like, I could see the scorecards reading maybe 115 to 113 or 115 to 112 if you consider like a knockdown potentially. But I think that Teofimo Lopez is going to win by like 1 or 2 rounds. You might even get a closer fight than that where it could be a controversial like majority decision win for Teofimo Lopez. But I'm going to go with Lopez via close, either split, majority, or a close, unanimous decision win. But I think it's going to be close, and I do think that it's going to go the distance here. But yeah, let me know what you think of Teofimo Lopez versus Sandor Martin. I think that this can be a very interesting fight. And I wouldn't be totally shocked if Sandor Martin wins. I mean, you want to talk about expect the unexpected. If Sandor Martin, within about a year, beats and upsets Mikey Garcia and Teofimo Lopez, I mean, damn. I just think that Teofimo Lopez is going to win via decision in this one. But I think that this can also be another stock builder for Sandor Martin if he does fight super competitively. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Teofimo Lopez versus Sandor Martin. Who do you have winning and how? And by the way, if Teofimo Lopez handles business here, then it's possible that he could fight the winner of Regis Prograis versus Jose Ramirez if they in fact make that fight for Regis Prograis' newly acquired 140-pound WBC title. Teofimo Lopez versus Sandor Martin's winner could be the next up for that. Or it's also possible, you never know, that they could pivot and make a Teofimo Lopez versus Sandor Martin winner versus the Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall 2 winner. Think about that. But how would you like to see the 140-pound matchups unfold? Please let me know in the comments. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.